Now here's a second problem, which shows another side of subqueries. We want to find the difference between a character's experience and their mentors. So let us solve it manually for one case in the characters table. So let us look at this character over here, which is Saruman with ID 11, and their experience is 8500. And then Saruman has character ID 6 as their mentor. So if I look for ID 6, we have Gandalf. This is not very canon compared to the story, but let's just roll with it. And Gandalf has 10,000 of experience. And now if we select the experience of Gandalf minus the experience of Saruman, we can see that there is a 1500 difference between their experience. And this is what I want to find with my query. Now, back to my query, I will first alias my columns in order to make them more informative. And this is a great trick to make problems clearer in your head. Assign the right names to things. So here, instead of ID, I will call this Mentee ID. And here I have Mentor ID. And here, instead of experience, I will call this Mentee experience. So I have just renamed my columns. Now, the missing piece of the puzzle is the mentor experience, right? So how can I get the mentor experience? For example, in the first case, I know that character 11 is mentored by character 6. How can I get the experience of character 6? Now, of course, I can take a new tab over here, split it to the right, go to fantasy characters, filter for ID being equal to 6, which is the ID of our mentor, and get their experience. And the experience in this case is 10,000. This is the same example that we saw before. But now I would have to write this separate query for each of my rows. So here 6 I've already checked, but then I will need to check 2 and 7 and 1, and this is really not feasible, right? And the solution, of course, is to solve it with a subquery. So what I'm gonna do here is open round brackets, and in here I will write the code that I need. And here I can simply copy the code that I've written here, get experience from the characters where ID equals 6. Now, the 6 part is still hard-coded because in the first row, mentor ID is 6. To avoid hard-coding this part, there are two components to this. The first one is noticing that I am referencing the same table, fantasy.characters, in two different places in my code. And this could get buggy and this could get confusing. And the solution is to give separate names to these two instances. Now, what are the right names to give? So if we look at this outer query right here, this is really information about the mentee, right? Because we have the mentee ID, the ID of their mentor, and the mentee experience. So I can simply call this mentee table. And as you can see, I can alias my table by simply writing it like this, or I could also add the as keyword. It would work just the same. On the other hand, this table will give us the experience of the mentor. This is really information about the mentor, so we can call this mentor table. Now, we're not going to get confused anymore because these two instances have different names. And now, what do we want this ID to be? If we're not going to hard code it, we want it to be this value over here. We want it to be the mentor ID value from the mentee table. We want it to be the mentee's mentor. And to refer to that column, I will get the table name dot the column name. So this is telling me get the mentor ID value from mentee table. And now that I have the subquery, which defines a column with these two brackets, I can alias the result just like I always do and run this. And now you will see, after making some room here, that we have successfully retrieved the experience value for the mentor. Now I realize that this is not the simplest process, so let us go back to our query over here and make sure that we understand exactly what is happening. Now, first of all, we're going to the characters table, which contains information about our mentee, the person who is being mentored. And we label the table so that we remember what it's about. We filter it because we're not interested in characters that do not have a mentor. And then we're getting a few data, right? The ID, in this case, represents the ID of the mentee. And we also have their mentor ID. And we also have the experience, which again, this is the table about the mentee, represents the mentee experience. Now, our goal is to also get the experience of their mentor. Our goal is to see that we have a mentor ID 6 and we want to know that their experience is 10,000. And we do that with a subquery. It's a query within a query. And in this subquery, which is an independent piece of SQL code, we are going back to the characters table, but this is another instance of the table, right, that we're looking at. So to make sure we remember that, we call this mentor table because it contains information about the mentor. And how do we make sure that we get the right value over here, that we don't get confused between separate mentors? We make sure that for each row, the ID of the character in this table is equal to the mentor ID value in the mentee table. In other words, we make sure that we plug in this value over here, in this case 6, into the table to get the right row. And then from that row, we get the experience value. All of this code over here defines a new column, which we call mentor experience. And this is basically the same thing that we did manually when we opened a table on the right and queried the table and copy-pasted the hard-coded value. This is just the way to do it dynamically with a subquery. Now we are not fully done with the problem, right? Because we wanted to see the difference between the character's experience and their mentors. So let's see how to do this. And the way to do it is with a column calculation, just like the ones we've seen before. So given that this column represents the mentor experience, I can remove the alias over here and over here as well. And I can subtract the experience from this. And a column minus a column gives me another column, which I can then alias as experience difference. And if I run this, I will see the value that we originally computed manually, which is the difference between the mentor and the mentee's experience. There's nothing really new about this, as long as you realize that this expression over here defines a column, and this is the reference to a column, and so you can subtract them and then give a name, an alias to the result.